So, what makes it powerful for you? Because, like I was saying, from my experience, it was very soothing
Mhm.
and quieting. Is that similar to your experience with it, or do you get something different out of it?
I really can't even quantify it. I just know that something happens where I think it definitely slows the thinking down. Um, and if, like if I had political power or something like that, or it was all of a sudden like have this album in the schools, this just required listening or something, but that would be kind of imposing things, but I think that there's a slowing down that happens, and my feeling about that is due to the circular nature of the music. Like when we listen to Bach, there's usually kind of a linear narrative that occurs even with Bach, even though Bach will do similar things in terms of like creating like a certain bass pattern, but it's different. That Bach will usually build a narrative on that that goes through different permutations. But there's something circular about this music. And I know from having played, like I play with a great chord player here in New York named Salio Suso. So we have a duo. And I know that what at first I was amazed like how they could just stay on the same thing. And I said, well, this is repetitive, my first beginner's mind going into it. But then I realized they were doing something with that. Like it sounds, yes, the superficial mind said this is repetitive. But then as I started to enter it, there's something happening with that circle. That circular motion in the music starts to generate its own power. And and I think that's part of the healing, the sound healing that's present in the music. Is that
Yeah,
that's circle because we're so used in our culture, in the Western culture, European, we're so used to linear narratives. And then all of a sudden we're exposed to something just going around and around. And I think that's just from an outsider of the culture, that's one thing that I experienced.
well, I think that's why it took me a few listens to really start to catch on to some of the subtleties, because I had to kind of reorganize my listening, because I am used to those more linear musical progressions, and this is something entirely different. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording about how you gave me a pretty extensive short list of some different options. And you said you were sort of surprised that I didn't go with the Robert Nighthawk album that
Mhm.
you had included on the list. And I nearly went with that. And I thought, let me do something that's kind of completely outside of the rock vernacular for a change. And so yeah, probably took me longer to even know what was going on than typically, where maybe on the first or second listen with a lot of the albums that I listen to for this show, I can kind of get in deeper more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's absolutely connections there. And of course, there's scholars out there who explored those connections very deeply. But the idea of a repetitive figure, like for example, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like you hear it in the Mississippi Blues, like you look at Howling Wolf, like smokestack lightning. You have boom, 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 boom. Just that's coming. It's clearly something that's coming from this world. Um, and how that whole song is just that riff going around the Howling
Yeah.
Wolf song. It's just, and so there's a connection, there's a direct connection there, I think.
Interesting. Yeah.
And there's people who've explored that and like, really in depth and but I think, that power, or like even you take a Bo Diddley piece, like, it's just one chord just going over and over again, and that is also, I think, connected to this musical world.